The trading station Nexus 7 orbited the twin suns of the Kepler system, a neutral zone where species from across the galaxy conducted business without the usual prejudices that plagued interstellar relations. Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Defense Corps stood at the observation deck, watching cargo vessels drift between the massive ring structures like metallic fish in a cosmic ocean. He shouldn't have been there. His leave had been denied twice, but Marcus had pulled strings with Admiral Rodriguez to get 72 hours of shore leave. After 18 months of patrolling the outer rim against pirate incursions, he needed to breathe air that wasn't recycled through military filters and eat food that hadn't been freeze-dried and reconstituted. The crowd around him was typical for Nexus 7. Tall, blue-skinned Altarians haggled with squat draconian merchants over rare earth minerals. A group of crystalline vegan diplomats discussed trade agreements through harmonic vibrations that made Marcus's teeth ache. Near the central plaza, performers from dozens of worlds entertained tourists and traders alike. That's when he saw her. She moved through the crowd like liquid shadow, her movements so fluid they seemed to defy the station's artificial gravity. Her skin was pale as moonlight, marked with intricate tattoos that seemed to shift and flow across her arms and neck. Traditional Japanese clothing had been modified for her alien physiology, dark fabric that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Most striking were her eyes, completely black with no visible iris or pupil, like looking into the void of space itself. She was Yamato, one of the most mysterious species in known space. They had appeared suddenly 50 years ago, claiming distant Earth as their ancestral home. Their technology was advanced, their martial arts legendary, and their isolationist policies absolute. Few beings had ever seen a Yamato outside their home systems. Fewer still had spoken with one. Marcus watched, fascinated, as she demonstrated what could only be described as supernatural combat techniques. She moved between invisible opponents, her hands and feet cutting through air with precision that created small sonic booms. The crowd gave her a wide berth, equal parts amazed and terrified. A commotion near the station's central market caught his attention. A squad of hegemony soldiers, their black and gold uniforms marking them as elite troops, were harassing a group of civilian traders. The hegemony controlled nearly 40% of known space through military might and economic manipulation. They were officially allied with Earth, but Marcus had seen enough of their methods to know they were bullies who used their power to intimidate anyone they considered inferior. The squad leader, a massive Gorvanian with tusks jutting from his lower jaw and cybernetic implants covering half his skull, was shoving an elderly Centaurian merchant. "Your permits are expired, herbivore. Pay the fine or we confiscate your cargo." "But sir," the Centaurian's translator device rendered his chittering sounds into standard galactic. "These permits were issued just last week on Proxima Station. They should be valid for another 6 months. Regulations changed yesterday," the Gorvanian lied smoothly. "New security protocols. Either pay the fine or face arrest for illegal trading." Marcus felt his jaw clench. He'd seen this scam countless times. Hegemony soldiers would claim regulations had changed, demand bribes, and split the profits with corrupt station administrators. The elderly trader clearly couldn't afford the outrageous fine, and his family probably depended on the cargo to survive. The Yamato warrior had stopped her demonstration. Those black eyes were fixed on the scene unfolding near the market. Marcus could see tension in her posture, the way her hands drifted toward weapons he couldn't see but knew were there. "I don't have that much currency," the Centaurian pleaded. "Please, my granddaughter needs medical treatment. This cargo is all we have." The Gorvanian's laugh was like grinding metal. "Not my problem, Bug Eyes. Zephyr, confiscate everything." A smaller soldier, his species unidentifiable behind full combat armor, moved toward the merchant's hovercart loaded with exotic spices and rare textiles. The old Centaurian tried to block him, but the armored figure casually backhanded him. The elderly alien crumpled to the deck, green blood trickling from his mandibles. That's when the Yamato moved. She crossed 30 meters of crowded plaza in perhaps 2 seconds, her form blurring as she utilized movement techniques that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The armored soldier reaching for the cart suddenly found himself flying backward, his weapon scattered across the deck in pieces. He hit a support pillar with enough force to dent the metal. The squad leader spun to face this new threat. You dare interfere with hegemony business, Shadow Dancer? She said nothing, just stood between the fallen merchant and the soldiers. Her stance was relaxed, almost casual, but Marcus could see the coiled potential in every line of her body. Stand down or face the consequences, the Gorvanian growled, his hand dropping to the plasma rifle at his hip. We are acting under Galactic Trade Authority. Still she remained silent. The crowd was backing away now, sensing the violence that was about to erupt. Station security was nowhere to be seen, probably paid off by the same corruption that allowed these shakedowns to continue. Marcus found himself moving forward. He had no jurisdiction here, no authority to intervene, but 18 months of fighting pirates and protecting civilian shipping lanes had left him with little tolerance for bullies in uniform. Actually, he called out as he approached, I think you'll find that's not true. The Gorvanian's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Marcus's uniform. Terran Defense Corps. This doesn't concern you, human. Harassment of civilian traders in neutral space concerns everyone, Marcus replied evenly. He pulled out his personal datapad and quickly accessed the Galactic Trade Database. According to current regulations, which I can verify in real time, this merchant's permits are valid for another 167 standard days. Regulations change, the soldier snarled. Not without proper notification through official channels, Marcus continued, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command, and certainly not retroactively. What you're attempting is extortion, which violates about 15 different interstellar treaties. The Yamato warrior turned those impossible black eyes toward him for a moment. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, as if she was looking directly into his soul and weighing what she found there. The tension in the plaza was thick enough to cut with a blade. Civilians continued backing away, some fleeing toward the safer sections of the station. The only sounds were the distant hum of life support systems and the subtle mechanical noises of the Gorvanian cybernetic implants. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind the squad leader's eyes. Take on a single human soldier and risk an interstellar incident, or back down and lose face in front of his troops and the crowd. What happened next would change everything. The Gorvanian's decision came with brutal swiftness. His massive hand shot out, not toward Marcus, but toward the Yamato warrior who stood silently between him and his intended victims. The slap was meant to humiliate, to show the crowd that even the legendary shadow dancers could be treated like common criminals. The sound echoed across the plaza like a gunshot. For a moment, time seemed frozen. The Yamato's head had barely moved from the impact, but something fundamental had shifted in the air around them. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice as he watched the warrior slowly turn her head back to face the Gorvanian. Those black eyes held no emotion, no anger, no surprise. They held something infinitely more terrifying. Absolute certainty. What happened next defied every law of physics Marcus thought he understood. The Yamato moved, but calling it movement was inadequate. She seemed to simply exist in one place, then exist in another, with no transition between the two states. One instant she was standing motionless. The next her hand was buried wrist-deep in the Gorvanian's chest, her fingers having passed through his combat armor like it was tissue paper. The squad leader looked down at his chest in confusion. The armor showed no damage, no breach, yet somehow her hand was inside his body. Marcus could see her fingers wrapped around something vital, something that kept the massive alien's heart beating. Impossible, the Gorvanian whispered, his cybernetic eye flickering as his nervous system began to shut down. Our armor is rated against plasma weapons. Nothing organic can penetrate adaptive nanosteel. The Yamato spoke for the first time, her voice carrying an accent that was somehow both ancient and familiar. You understand very little about what is possible. She withdrew her hand with the same fluid motion. The Gorvanian's armor sealed itself automatically, the nanosteel flowing back together without leaving so much as a scratch. But the damage was done. The massive alien swayed on his feet, his face paling to a sickly yellow-green. 2 seconds, she said quietly, her black eyes never leaving his face. That is how long you have before your cardiovascular system completely fails. Marcus watched in horrified fascination as the Gorvanian's knees buckled. The other soldiers raised their weapons, but their leader held up a trembling hand to stop them. How? He gasped, blood beginning to foam at the corners of his mouth. Your armor protects against energy weapons and projectiles. the Yamato explained with clinical detachment. It cannot protect against techniques that manipulate molecular coherence. I have disrupted the electromagnetic bonds in your circulatory system. In approximately 1 second, your blood will lose molecular integrity. The Gorvanian opened his mouth to speak, but only made a wet, choking sound. His cybernetic implant sparked and went dark as his nervous system failed to provide adequate power. His massive body hit the deck with a sound like falling timber. The other soldiers stared at their fallen leader in shock. Their weapons remained raised, but Marcus could see the uncertainty in their body language. They had just watched their seemingly invincible squad leader killed by what appeared to be an unarmed female who hadn't even moved fast enough for them to track. "Scan him," one of the soldiers whispered. "Full medical scan." The readings that came back from their equipment made no sense. The Gorvanian's armor was completely intact, showing no signs of damage or penetration, yet every organ in his torso had suffered catastrophic failure simultaneously. His blood had somehow lost molecular cohesion, turning into something resembling red water that could no longer carry oxygen or nutrients. "This is impossible," another soldier muttered, his weapon wavering. "Nothing can do this. The scan shows no external damage, no energy discharge, no foreign substances." Marcus found his voice. "Stand down," he said, his command training taking over despite his own shock. "Your squad leader attacked a non-combatant in neutral space. Under Galactic military code, her response was proportionate self-defense." "Self-defense?" one of the soldiers snarled. "She murdered him with some kind of alien witchcraft." The Yamato warrior turned those impossible eyes toward the speaker. "Would you like to discover if it is witchcraft?" The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could see the calculations running through the soldiers' minds. They had superior numbers and weapons, but they had just watched their most heavily armored squad leader killed by a technique they couldn't understand. Detect or defend against station security finally arrived. A mixed group of beings from various species wearing the blue and silver uniforms of Nexus 7 peacekeepers. Their leader, a tall Altarian with the bearing of a military veteran, quickly assessed the situation. "Lower your weapons," he commanded the hegemony soldiers. "This is neutral space. No military actions are permitted without station authority approval." "That thing murdered our squad leader," one of the soldiers protested. The security chief's scanner had already analyzed the scene. According to sensor data, the deceased struck the defendant first. Under station law, she was within her rights to defend herself. He paused, studying his readings with obvious confusion. "Though I admit the method of defense is unprecedented." Marcus stepped forward, pulling out his identification. "Captain Marcus Chen, Terran Defense Corps. I witnessed the entire incident." The deceased squad leader was conducting an illegal extortion operation against civilian traders. When confronted with evidence that his claims were false, he resorted to violence against a non-combatant. The Yamato warrior looked at him again, and Marcus felt that same chill. But this time there was something else in those black depths. Respect, curiosity. It was impossible to tell. "The matter will be investigated," the security chief announced. "All parties will need to provide statements. The body will be examined by station medical personnel." One of the surviving soldiers stepped forward, his face twisted with rage. "This isn't over, human. The hegemony doesn't forget those who interfere with our operations." Marcus met his gaze steadily. "Neither does the Terran Defense Corps forget those who threaten our allies." As the soldiers were escorted away and the crowd began to disperse, Marcus found himself alone with the Yamato warrior and the elderly Centaurian trader, who was slowly picking himself up from the deck. "Thank you," the old alien said, his translator device rendering his gratitude in standard galactic. "Both of you. Without your intervention, my family would have starved." The Yamato warrior bowed slightly, a gesture that seemed both respectful and somehow formal. "The strong who prey upon the weak dishonor themselves and all who permit it." She turned to Marcus, studying him with those unsettling eyes. "You risked much for someone not of your species." "It was the right thing to do," Marcus replied simply. For the first time since he'd seen her, something that might have been a smile crossed her features. "Perhaps. Tell me, Captain Chen of the Terran Defense Corps, do you believe in destiny?" "I believe in making your own choices and accepting the consequences," he answered. She nodded slowly. "An interesting philosophy. We may speak again." With that, she turned and began to walk away, her form already starting to blur at the edges as she employed whatever techniques allowed her to move through crowds like a ghost. Marcus called after her. Wait, I don't even know your name. She paused without turning around. I am Kasumi Nakamura, and you, Marcus Chen, have just changed the course of galactic history. Then she was gone, disappeared into the crowd so completely that Marcus began to wonder if he had imagined the entire encounter. But the body of the Gorvanian squad leader was very real, and the questions it raised would soon reach the highest levels of government across known space. 3 days after the incident on Nexus 7, Marcus found himself in the worst possible situation for a career military officer. Sitting across from a panel of superior officers who looked like they wanted to feed him to a black hole. Admiral Rodriguez sat in the center of the tribunal, her weathered face showing the strain of commanding humanity's defense forces for the past decade. To her left was General Morrison, head of military intelligence, whose cybernetic eye whirred constantly as it recorded every word. To her right sat Ambassador Kenji Tanaka, Earth's chief diplomatic representative to the Galactic Council. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Captain, Admiral Rodriguez began, her voice carrying the tone of someone who had spent the last 72 hours fielding angry communications from across the galaxy. You were on unauthorized leave when you decided to interfere with a hegemony military operation in neutral space. The operation was illegal extortion. Admiral, Marcus replied, keeping his voice steady. They were shaking down civilian traders using false claims about regulation changes. That's not the point, General Morrison interjected, his natural eye glaring while his cybernetic one continued its relentless recording. You had no authority to intervene. More importantly, your actions led to the death of a hegemony squad leader by methods we still don't understand. Ambassador Tanaka leaned forward. Do you have any idea what kind of diplomatic nightmare this has created? The hegemony is demanding your immediate extradition for trial on charges of conspiracy to commit murder. They're claiming you and this Yamato warrior were working together to assassinate their personnel. Marcus felt a surge of frustration. With respect, Ambassador, that's ridiculous. I'd never seen her before that day, and I certainly didn't ask her to kill anyone. But you admit you spoke with her before the incident? General Morrison's cybernetic eye focused on Marcus with uncomfortable intensity. I exchanged maybe 3 sentences with her the entire time, Marcus replied, mostly after the squad leader was already dead. Admiral Rodriguez consulted her datapad. According to your statement, she said you had changed the course of galactic history. That suggests some level of premeditation. She said that as she was leaving, Admiral. I have no idea what she meant by it. The Admiral's expression softened slightly. Marcus, we've known each other for 8 years. You're one of our best officers and your record speaks for itself. But this situation is spiraling beyond our control. She activated a holographic display that showed a 3-dimensional map of known space. Red indicators marked hegemony territory, blue showed human space, and dozens of other colors represented the various alien civilizations that made up the Galactic Council. The hegemony is mobilizing 3 full battle fleets, she continued. They're claiming this was an act of war by Earth in alliance with the Yamato. Meanwhile, the Yamato government has gone completely silent. Their ambassador to the Galactic Council hasn't been seen in 48 hours. General Morrison activated another display showing security, footage from Nexus 7. We've analyzed this, recording frame by frame using every enhancement technique available. Watch carefully. The footage showed the moment of the confrontation in slow motion. Marcus could see the Gorvanian's hand moving toward Kasumi, the impact of the slap, and then nothing. One frame showed Kasumi standing normally. The next showed her hand inside the squad leader's chest. There was no transition, no blur of movement, nothing to indicate how she had covered the distance or penetrated the armor. Our best physicists are baffled, the general continued. The armor shows no damage. Energy sensors detected no weapon discharge. It's as if she simply decided his internal organs should stop working and they obeyed. Ambassador Tanaka pulled up another file. What's more disturbing is that this isn't an isolated incident. We've been quietly investigating reports of similar deaths over the past 6 months. Pirates found dead in their ships with no signs of external trauma. Slavers discovered in their quarters with their cardiovascular systems mysteriously failed, all in locations where Yamato ships were detected nearby. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Are you suggesting she's some kind of assassin? We're suggesting, Admiral Rodriguez said carefully, that the Yamato may have capabilities we severely underestimated. and your encounter with one of them has put Earth in an impossible position. The room's communication system chimed, indicating an incoming priority message. The Admiral activated it, and the face of President Harrison appeared in the hologram. Admiral, I need an immediate update on the situation. The Hegemony Ambassador just delivered an ultimatum to the Senate. Either we hand over Captain Chen and provide full details on our collaboration with the Yamato, or they consider it an act of war. Mr. President, Admiral Rodriguez replied, we're still investigating the incident. Captain Chen appears to be an innocent bystander who got caught up in something much larger. Innocent or not, Admiral, we can't afford a war with the Hegemony. They control the shipping lanes that keep our colonies supplied. If they blockade our trade routes, millions of people will starve. General Morrison leaned into the communication pickup. Mr. President, we have reason to believe the Yamato have been conducting covert operations against various criminal organizations. This may have been a case of wrong place, wrong time. Then why haven't they responded to our diplomatic inquiries? President Harrison's frustration was evident. We've sent 3 separate messages to their government requesting clarification. Complete silence. Ambassador Tanaka cleared his throat. Sir, there's something else. Intelligence reports suggest the Yamato may have been protecting specific targets. The pirates and slavers who died under mysterious circumstances were all involved in trafficking operations. Specifically, trafficking of humans. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place in his mind. Are you telling me, President Harrison said slowly, that the Yamato have been secretly protecting human civilians? It's possible, sir, the ambassador replied. But their methods raise serious questions about what other capabilities they possess. Admiral Rodriguez turned back to Marcus. Captain, I need you to think very carefully. Did this Kasumi Nakamura say anything that might give us insight into Yamato intentions? Any hint about why they might be conducting these operations? Marcus closed his eyes, replaying the conversation in his mind. She said something about the strong who prey upon the weak dishonoring themselves and all who permit it. When she killed the squad leader, she seemed completely calm about it, like it was just removing an obstacle. Anything else? She asked if I believed in destiny. When I said I believed in making choices and accepting consequences, she seemed approving? It's hard to explain. General Morrison's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on Marcus. Captain, are you absolutely certain you had never encountered this individual before? Positive, sir. I'd remember those eyes. Describe them. Completely black. No visible iris or pupil, like looking into deep space. The 3 senior officers exchanged glances that Marcus couldn't interpret. Ambassador Tanaka pulled up another file. Captain, what I'm about to show you is classified at the highest levels. According to our xenobiology experts, that description matches no known Yamato physiology. Standard Yamato have brown or black eyes with normal human-like structure. The hologram displayed anatomical charts comparing human and Yamato biology. They were remarkably similar, with only minor differences in bone density and muscle fiber composition. So what exactly did I encounter on that station? Marcus asked. Admiral Rodriguez's expression was grim. That, Captain, is exactly what we need to find out. Because if our analysis is correct, you may have just met the first confirmed member of a Yamato subspecies that officially doesn't exist. The communication system chimed again. This time the caller ID showed only a series of symbols that looked like stylized Japanese characters. Incoming transmission from Yamato space, the Admiral announced. This is the first communication we've received from them since the incident. The hologram activated, revealing a figure in traditional Japanese robes, sitting in what appeared to be a garden. His features were distinctly Asian, but his eyes held the same ageless quality Marcus had seen in Kasumi. Greetings, leaders of Earth, the figure said in perfect standard galactic. I am Takeshi Yamamoto, speaker for the Hidden Council of Yamato. We believe it is time we spoke about the future of humanity in the galaxy. The figure in the hologram waited patiently as the Earth leadership absorbed his words. Marcus could see the tension in the room ratchet up several degrees. A hidden council implied levels of Yamato society that humanity had never suspected existed. Speaker Yamamoto, Admiral Rodriguez finally responded, her military training keeping her voice steady despite the circumstances. We appreciate you reaching out. We've been trying to establish communication regarding the incident on Nexus 7. The incident, Yamamoto said with what might have been amusement, was not an incident at all. It was a test. One that your Captain Chen passed admirably. All eyes turned to Marcus, who felt like he was falling down a rabbit hole that got deeper with every revelation. A test for what? Yamamoto's gaze shifted to focus directly on Marcus through the hologram. To determine if humanity was ready to learn the truth about their place in the galaxy, and more importantly, about their heritage. General Morrison's cybernetic eye whirred frantically. Speaker Yamamoto, with respect, humanity's heritage is well documented. We originated on Earth, developed spaceflight, and expanded into the galaxy over the past 3 centuries. That is the history you know, Yamamoto replied. It is not the history that is. Ambassador Tanaka leaned forward. Are you suggesting that human historical records are somehow inaccurate? I am stating that they are deliberately incomplete. Yamamoto's tone carried the weight of absolute certainty. Tell me, Captain Chen, what do you know about the expansion of Japanese culture into space? Marcus searched his memory. Standard history says that Earth's expansion was led primarily by American and European coalitions, with Asian nations playing supporting roles. Japan contributed advanced robotics and miniaturization technology. And yet, Yamamoto continued, you encountered Kasumi Nakamura on Nexus 7, a woman whose abilities defy every law of physics your scientists understand. Does this not suggest that perhaps your history books have missed something significant? President Harrison's voice came through the communication system, tight with controlled frustration. Speaker Yamamoto, we're facing a potential war with the hegemony over this incident. If you have information that could help resolve this crisis, we need it now. The crisis, Mr. President, has been building for 50 years. The incident on Nexus 7 merely accelerated an inevitable confrontation. Yamamoto stood, his robes rustling with the movement. Are you familiar with the concept of ninjutsu? Ancient Japanese martial arts, Marcus replied automatically. Stealth techniques, assassination methods, espionage training. Most historians consider it largely mythologized. Most historians, Yamamoto said with definite amusement now, have never seen a master practitioner liquefy an opponent's blood by manipulating molecular bonds. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus felt his worldview reshaping itself around this new information. Are you telling us, Admiral Rodriguez said slowly, that ninjutsu techniques actually work? That they're based on real science? I am telling you that what you call science is merely the visible surface of a much deeper ocean. Your physicists understand energy and matter, but they do not understand the relationship between consciousness and quantum mechanics. They cannot manipulate probability or phase shift through solid matter because they believe such things are impossible. General Morrison activated his recording equipment. Speaker Yamamoto, these claims are extraordinary. Are you suggesting that the Yamato possess technology that allows them to violate physical laws? Not technology, General. Training, discipline, an understanding of the universe that your Western science has rejected in favor of reductive materialism. Yamamoto gestured, and the hologram expanded to show what appeared to be a vast underground complex. For 2,000 years, select bloodlines have preserved and refined techniques that your ancestors dismissed as superstition. The view shifted to show training, halls where figures moved through forms that seemed to bend reality around them. Marcus watched in fascination as a student appeared to walk through a solid wall, while another seemed to strike targets from impossible distances without moving. When Earth began its expansion into space, Yamamoto continued, the Masters realized that humanity would need protection among the stars. Certain families volunteered to establish hidden colonies in distant systems, preserving the old ways while the rest of humanity forgot them. Ambassador Tanaka was furiously taking notes. You're saying the Yamato are actually human colonists who left Earth centuries ago? We are saying that we are human colonists who never forgot what humanity was capable of becoming. Yamamoto's expression grew serious. And now, Captain Chen, we come to why your actions on Nexus 7 were so significant. Marcus felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. I just tried to stop some bullies from robbing an old man. You demonstrated the moral courage that has always been humanity's greatest strength. When faced with injustice, you intervened despite having no obligation and no authority. You risked your career, your freedom, possibly your life for a being not of your species. Yamamoto nodded approvingly. This is what we have been waiting to see. Waiting for what purpose? President Harrison demanded. To determine if humanity was ready to reclaim its true heritage. For 2 millennia, the Masters have watched their cousins spread across the galaxy, growing in numbers and technology but losing touch with their deeper capabilities. We have protected human colonies from the shadows, eliminated threats before they could take root, prepared for the day when open contact might be possible. Admiral Rodriguez was studying star charts on her datapad. The unexplained deaths, pirates, slavers, human trafficking operations. You've been conducting covert operations across human space for decades. Centuries, Yamamoto corrected, though we accelerated our activities when we realized the hegemony was planning something that would threaten all free species in the galaxy. The room fell silent. General Morrison's cybernetic eye stopped whirring for the first time since the conversation began. What kind of threat? The general asked. The kind that requires humanity to remember what it means to be human, Yamamoto replied. Captain Chen, when Kasumi departed Nexus 7, where did she go? Marcus tried to remember. She just vanished into the crowd. I didn't see where she went after that. She went to Earth. The simple statement hit the room like a physical blow. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Impossible, Admiral Rodriguez said immediately. Our sensor networks would have detected any unauthorized approach to Earth space. Would they detect a ship that doesn't exist in your dimension until it chooses to? Yamamoto asked. At this moment, Kasumi Nakamura is in Tokyo, in the archives beneath the old Imperial Palace. She is retrieving something that was hidden there 800 years ago. President Harrison's voice was strained. What kind of something? The original training manuals. The complete records of what your species was capable of before it forgot how to dream, beyond the limitations of Newtonian physics. Yamamoto's image began to fade slightly. She will be returning to Yamato space within the hour, carrying knowledge that could transform every human in the galaxy into something the hegemony cannot threaten, cannot control, cannot defeat. And the price? Ambassador Tanaka asked, his diplomatic training recognizing a negotiation when he saw one. No price. This is not a transaction. It is a homecoming. The image solidified again. However, there is a choice to be made. Humanity can continue as it has, growing stronger in technology but remaining vulnerable to those who understand the deeper laws of reality. Or it can remember what it was meant to become. Marcus found himself speaking before he realized it. What are we meant to become? Yamamoto smiled, and for a moment his eyes showed the same impossible depths Marcus had seen in Kasumi's. The species that teaches the galaxy what it means to be truly alive. But first, Captain Chen, you have a choice to make. What choice? The hegemony fleets are moving toward Earth. They believe they can force humanity to surrender by cutting off your trade routes and starving your colonies. They do not know what we know about human potential. Yamamoto's expression grew deadly serious. You can remain here following orders and hoping diplomacy will solve this crisis. Or you can come with Kasumi when she returns and learn what your ancestors knew about the art of war. The weight of Yamamoto's offer hung in the air like a physical presence. Marcus could feel everyone in the room staring at him, waiting for his response to an invitation that defied everything they thought they knew about reality. With respect, Speaker Yamamoto, Admiral Rodriguez interjected, Captain Chen is under military jurisdiction during an active crisis. He cannot simply leave with your operative. Admiral, Yamamoto replied with infinite patience. Within 6 hours, your long-range sensors will detect the lead elements of the hegemony blockade fleet. Within 12 hours, they will begin interdicting supply ships to your colonies. Within 72 hours, unless something changes dramatically, millions of humans will begin to starve. General Morrison leaned forward. Are you threatening us? I am providing you with intelligence based on our surveillance of hegemony fleet movements. The decision they made after the incident on Nexus 7 was not spontaneous. This operation has been planned for months. The death of squad leader Carthan merely provided them with a convenient excuse to implement it. President Harrison's voice came through the speakers with barely controlled desperation. Then help us. If your people have these capabilities you're describing, surely you can prevent this blockade. We can, Yamamoto acknowledged. A single Yamato ship could disable their entire fleet without firing a shot. But that would solve nothing. The hegemony would simply build more ships, develop new strategies, perhaps ally with other species who fear humanity's potential. The only permanent solution is for humanity itself to become strong enough that such threats are meaningless. Marcus felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. How long would this training take? For basic competency? 3 months. For true mastery? A lifetime. But you would not be learning from nothing, Captain. The potential already exists within you, within every human. We would simply be teaching you to access what was always there. Ambassador Tanaka was furiously calculating diplomatic angles. Speaker Yamamoto, even if we accepted your proposal, how could we justify Captain Chen's absence to the hegemony? They're demanding his immediate extradition. The hegemony may demand whatever they choose. Whether they receive it is another matter entirely. Yamamoto's image flickered, and suddenly he was no longer alone in the garden. Kasumi Nakamura materialized beside him, though she hadn't been there a moment before. The archives have been opened, she reported. Her voice carrying that same otherworldly calm Marcus remembered from Nexus 7. The knowledge is secure. Excellent. Yamamoto turned back to the camera. Captain Chen, time grows short. The hegemony believes they understand humanity's military capabilities because they have observed your conventional forces. They have not observed what humans can become when they stop limiting themselves to what their instructors told them was possible. Marcus looked around the room at the faces of his superiors. Admiral Rodriguez wore the expression of someone watching her carefully ordered world dissolve into chaos. General Morrison's cybernetic eye was working overtime, trying to process information that defied logical categorization. Ambassador Tanaka looked like a man trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Admiral, Marcus said quietly, what are my orders? Rodriguez was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried the weariness of command in impossible circumstances. Officially, Captain, you are to remain on Earth pending resolution of the diplomatic crisis with the hegemony. And unofficially? Unofficially, I'm looking at a military situation that conventional tactics cannot resolve. If Speaker Yamamoto is correct about the hegemony's intentions, we need options that don't exist in any training manual I've ever read. President Harrison's voice cut through the tension. Captain Chen, I'm authorizing you to accompany the Yamato representative under the Emergency Powers Clause of the Colonial Defense Act. Your mission is to assess the viability of their proposed training program and report back with recommendations. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and terror. He was being given permission to step off the edge of the known universe. Understood, Mr. President. What about the hegemony demands? Let me worry about the politics, Harrison replied. General Morrison, how long can we delay their ultimatum? Standard diplomatic protocols allow for a 72-hour review period for extradition requests involving military personnel, the general said. I can stretch that to perhaps 5 days if I cite procedural complications. Do it. The president's tone was decisive. Captain Chen, you have 5 days to determine if this training program can provide viable alternatives to conventional military response. Yamamoto bowed slightly. A wise decision. Captain, if you are ready, we should depart immediately. The training facility is located in a system not marked on any galactic charts. Marcus stood, his mind racing with the implications of what he was about to do. How exactly do we get there? I assume standard transport won't suffice. Kasumi stepped forward. Place your hand on mine, Captain Chen. Marcus hesitated. The last time she had touched someone, that person had died in ways that defied medical explanation. Is this safe? Define safe, she replied with what might have been humor. You will not be harmed if that is your concern, but you may find your understanding of reality somewhat altered. Against every instinct screaming warnings in his head, Marcus reached out and placed his hand on hers. Her skin was surprisingly warm, and he could feel a subtle energy flowing through her that seemed to resonate with something deep inside his own cells. Close your eyes, she instructed, and try not to resist the sensation of movement. The world dissolved. Marcus felt like he was falling through liquid starlight. Every atom in his body seemed to vibrate at frequencies he could hear as music. Time stretched and compressed around him like taffy. He could sense vast distances being crossed in heartbeats, though he had no reference point to understand how such movement was possible. When the sensation stopped, he found himself standing on a platform overlooking a valley that belonged on no world he had ever seen. Twin suns cast strange shadows across training grounds where hundreds of figures moved through forms that seemed to reshape the air around them. Architecture that appeared to be grown rather than built rose from the valley floor in organic spirals that defied traditional engineering principles. Welcome to Yamato Prime, Kasumi said, her voice now carrying harmonics that resonated in his bones. the hidden heart of what humanity can become. Marcus turned to look at her and nearly staggered. Her appearance had changed subtly but dramatically. The tattoos covering her skin now seemed to be made of living light that flowed beneath the surface. Her black eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire star systems. "What happened to you?" he asked. "Nothing happened to me. You are now seeing me as I actually am, rather than through the filters your previous reality imposed on your perception." She gestured toward the valley below. "This is what you will learn, Captain. Not just new fighting techniques, but new ways of existing in the universe." In the distance, Marcus could see what appeared to be space docks where ships of completely alien design waited. Their hulls seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy, as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Those vessels," Kasumi explained, following his gaze, "are how we have moved undetected through hegemony space for centuries. They exist primarily in what you would call quantum probability, until their pilots choose to make them real." "This is impossible," Marcus said automatically, then stopped himself. "No, I need to stop thinking that way, don't I? You are learning already." For the first time since he had met her, Kasumi actually smiled. "Come, Captain. Your instructors are waiting, and time, as you understand it, is running out for the species you both serve." As they walked toward the valley, Marcus could feel something fundamental changing inside him. Whether it was the strange energy of this place or simply the process of accepting that everything he thought he knew was wrong, he could sense capabilities awakening that had always been there, waiting for permission to emerge. Behind them, on a world light years away, Admiral Rodriguez was staring at an empty space where Marcus and Kasumi had vanished without triggering a single sensor alarm. "General," she said quietly, "I think we're about to find out whether humanity is ready for whatever comes next." The first thing Marcus learned about Yamato training was that everything he thought he knew about physical conditioning was laughably primitive. On his second day in the valley, he watched a 12-year-old girl phase through a solid stone wall like it was made of mist, emerge on the other side, and then solidify the wall again behind her. "How is that possible?" he asked his instructor, an elderly man named Hiroshi who appeared to be in his 70s but moved with the fluid grace of someone a quarter his age. "You are asking the wrong question," Hiroshi replied, settling into a meditation posture that somehow allowed him to float 3 inches off the ground. "The correct question is, why do you believe it should be impossible?" Marcus had been struggling with this fundamental shift in thinking since his arrival. Everything about Yamato Prime challenged the basic assumptions of reality he had carried his entire life. The architecture shifted and flowed like living tissue. The gravity seemed to respond to the inhabitants' intentions rather than following fixed laws. Even the light from the twin suns appeared to bend around objects in ways that made no sense according to any physics he knew. "Because matter is solid," Marcus said, falling back on his scientific education. "Quantum mechanics shows us that particles have defined properties. You can't just walk through solid objects without some kind of technology to phase shift your molecular structure." "Ah," Hiroshi nodded approvingly. "You are beginning to understand. Quantum mechanics does indeed show us that particles have properties, but it also shows us that those properties exist only when they are observed. When not being observed, particles exist in states of pure probability." Marcus felt his brain trying to tie itself in knots. "Are you saying that the wall only becomes solid when someone is looking at it?" "I am saying that solidity is a consensus agreement between consciousness and matter. When consciousness chooses not to participate in that agreement, matter becomes much more flexible." Hiroshi gestured, and the stone bench beneath him flowed like water, reshaping itself into a perfect circle. "Your scientists understand the mathematics of quantum mechanics. They do not understand the role of intent in collapsing probability waves." Over the following days, Marcus began to experience firsthand what Hiroshi meant. His training started with meditation techniques that seemed designed to disconnect his mind from preconceived notions about physical limitations. Hours spent in states of consciousness where his sense of self expanded beyond the boundaries of his body. Exercises that taught him to perceive the energy patterns that flowed through all matter. "Feel the rhythm of your heartbeat," Kasumi instructed during one session. "Now feel the rhythm of the planet's magnetic field. Now synchronize them." It should have been impossible, but Marcus found that with the right state of focused attention, he could actually sense the vast electromagnetic currents flowing through Yamato Prime's core. More incredibly, he discovered that by adjusting his breathing and heart rate, He could harmonize his personal bioelectric field with the planetary energy matrix. When this happened, remarkable things began to occur. His movements became effortless, as if gravity had reduced its hold on him. His reflexes accelerated to the point where he could snatch insects out of the air without conscious thought. Most unsettling, he began to sense the intentions of others before they acted on them. This is how Kasumi knew the Gorvanian was going to strike her, Marcus realized during his third day of training. She felt his decision forming before he made the physical movement. Exactly, Hiroshi confirmed. When consciousness expands beyond the illusion of separation between self and environment, the universe becomes much more cooperative. But the real breakthrough came during weapons training with an instructor called Ryu, a woman whose age was impossible to determine and whose movements seemed to exist outside normal space-time. Traditional martial arts teach you to use your body as a weapon, she explained as she demonstrated techniques with a sword that appeared to be made of crystallized light. Advanced martial arts teach you to use the universe as a weapon. Marcus watched in fascination as Ryu faced off against 3 opponents simultaneously. She never moved faster than a normal human, never displayed superhuman strength, yet her opponents found themselves defeated by their own attacks. Strikes that should have connected with her instead struck each other. Weapons thrown at her somehow changed direction mid-flight and disabled their wielders. I don't understand how you're doing that, Marcus said after the demonstration. I am not doing anything, Ryu replied, her sword dissolving back into particles of light. I am simply choosing not to participate in their version of reality. Where their attacks succeed, she handed him a practice sword that felt substantial enough but seemed to shift between solid and energy depending on how he held it. Now you try. But first you must release your attachment to the idea that you can be harmed. Easy for you to say, Marcus muttered, facing off against a training construct that looked like a humanoid robot but moved with organic fluidity. You've had decades to perfect this. I have had lifetimes, Ryu corrected him. But you have advantages I did not possess when I began. Such as, you were born in space, raised among alien cultures, trained to think in 3 dimensions and multiple gravity fields. Your mind is already more flexible than those of us who grew up believing in a single, fixed reality. She stepped back, giving him room to work. Begin. The construct attacked with movements too fast for normal human reflexes to follow. Marcus's first instinct was to block conventionally, muscle against machine. The impact nearly shattered his arm. Stop trying to impose your will on the situation, Ryu called out. Start listening to what the situation wants to become. Marcus tried to understand what she meant while dodging increasingly aggressive attacks. Stop imposing his will? The construct was trying to pummel him into unconsciousness. How could he not resist that? Then, in a moment of desperation, he stopped thinking entirely. Instead of planning his next move, he simply let his body flow with the energy patterns he had been learning to perceive. Instead of fighting the construct's attacks, he allowed them to guide his movements. The result was extraordinary. The construct's fist passed through the space where Marcus's head had been a microsecond before, but Marcus hadn't consciously dodged. He had simply been somewhere else when the attack arrived. His counter-attack happened without planning, his practice sword somehow finding the exact point where the construct's defenses were non-existent. Better, Ryu observed as the construct shut down. You are beginning to understand cooperation rather than conflict. Over the following days, Marcus's abilities accelerated at a rate that would have been impossible under normal training conditions. He learned to move through solid matter by convincing it to temporarily change its molecular density. He mastered techniques for manipulating gravitational fields on a local scale, allowing him to walk on walls or leap impossible distances. Most remarkably, he began to develop the ability to affect electronic systems through pure intention, overloading circuits or reprogramming computers through focused mental energy. How far can these abilities extend? He asked Hiroshi during an evening meditation session. How far do you choose to extend them? The old master replied. Some of our advanced practitioners can influence entire star systems. Others prefer to focus on more subtle applications. There are masters who can heal dying worlds by harmonizing their electromagnetic fields. Others who can navigate through hyperspace without instruments by following quantum probability currents. Marcus tried to wrap his mind around the implications. If these abilities are real, If humans are actually capable of this, why hasn't any of this knowledge reached mainstream Earth? Hiroshi's expression grew sad. Because your civilization chose a different path. After the first space colonies were established, Earth's leaders decided that technological solutions were safer than human development. They feared that individuals with these capabilities might become too powerful, might upset the social order. So they suppressed the knowledge? They simply stopped teaching it. Within a few generations, most humans had forgotten it was ever possible. The Yamato maintained the traditions because we believed that someday humanity would need to remember what it was capable of becoming. As Marcus's training progressed, news from human space grew increasingly dire. The hegemony blockade had begun in earnest, with supply convoys being intercepted and colonies reporting shortages of essential materials. More ominously, intelligence reports suggested that other alien civilizations were watching humanity's response to see if Earth could be safely challenged. The hegemony is not the real threat, Yamamoto explained during one of their evening briefings. They are merely testing human resolve on behalf of a coalition of species that fear humanity's expansion. If Earth capitulates to these demands, it will signal to the entire galaxy that humans can be intimidated through economic pressure. And if we resist? Marcus asked, then the real war begins, not just with the hegemony, but with a dozen other civilizations that would prefer to eliminate the human threat before it becomes too powerful to contain. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. No pressure at all. Kasumi, who had been observing his training with the journey back to Earth, took place in what Kasumi called probability space, a method of travel that bypassed normal physics entirely. Marcus found himself standing on the bridge of a Yamato vessel that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, watching reality flow past like a river of liquid stars. 15 minutes until we reach Earth space, Kasumi announced, her form flickering between solid matter and pure energy, as she interfaced directly with the ship's quantum navigation systems. Initial scans show the alien fleet has taken position at the edge of the solar system. Marcus studied the tactical display, though the symbols and readings were unlike anything in standard military databases. The unknown fleet consisted of nearly 200 vessels, their design suggesting a coalition of multiple species rather than a single civilization's technology. Who are they? He asked Yamamoto, who stood at the center of the bridge with his hands folded behind his back, apparently unconcerned by the approaching crisis. Observers initially, the Yamato leader replied, representatives from the Altarian Collective, the Draconian Trade Federation, the crystalline hegemony of Vega, and several smaller powers. They have come to witness humanity's response to the hegemony blockade. Witness or participate, that depends entirely on how the next few hours unfold. Yamamoto turned to face Marcus directly. Captain Chen, your species stands at a crossroads. You can respond to this crisis using conventional military tactics, which will likely result in a devastating war that spreads across multiple star systems. Or you can demonstrate that humanity has evolved beyond the need for such crude solutions. Marcus felt the weight of impossible responsibility settling on his shoulders. You're asking me to represent all of humanity with abilities I've been training in for less than a week. I am asking you to be what you have always been, a human being who chooses to do what is right regardless of the personal cost. Kasumi's voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with something deep in Marcus's cells. The techniques you have learned are not the source of your strength. They are simply tools that allow your true nature to express itself more clearly. The ship emerged from probability space at the edge of Earth's solar system, materializing directly between the alien fleet and the blue-white sphere of humanity's birth world. Immediately, Marcus could see the scope of the crisis unfolding. The hegemony blockade consisted of 50 massive warships positioned at key hyperspace jump points, effectively cutting off all trade routes to human colonies. But the new arrivals dwarfed even that impressive force. Ships the size of small moons hung in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with technologies that hurt to look at directly. Incoming transmission from Earth Defense Command, one of the Yamato technicians announced. Admiral Rodriguez is requesting immediate communication with Captain Chen. The holographic display activated, showing the familiar face of Marcus's commanding officer. But Rodriguez looked like she had aged years in the few days since he had seen her. Dark circles under her eyes, stress lines around her mouth, and the haunted expression of someone watching her worst nightmares come true. "Marcus," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled desperation. "Thank God you're alive. We've been tracking massive energy readings from your position, but our sensors couldn't get a lock on your ship. Admiral, what's the current situation?"
Catastrophic.
The hegemony began their blockade 36 hours ago. 17 colony worlds are already reporting critical shortages. But that's not the worst part. She paused, consulting data that scrolled past too quickly for Marcus to read. The alien coalition arrived 6 hours ago and immediately demanded a meeting with Earth's leadership. They're claiming that humanity's expansion into the galaxy violates ancient territorial agreements we never knew existed. Marcus felt his heart sink. What kind of territorial agreements? According to their spokesman, the galaxy was divided into spheres of influence millennia ago, long before humanity achieved spaceflight. Apparently, we've been inadvertently colonizing worlds that were reserved for other species' eventual expansion. Yamamoto stepped into the holographic pickup. "Admiral Rodriguez, this is Speaker Yamamoto of the Yamato Hidden Council. The territorial claims being made by the coalition are fabricated. They are using this crisis as an excuse to eliminate humanity before your species becomes too powerful to challenge conventionally." Rodriguez's eyes widened with recognition. "Speaker Yamamoto, your government's assistance during this crisis would be invaluable. Do the Yamato have military forces that could help break the blockade?" "We do. But military intervention would only escalate the conflict and provide the coalition with justification for more aggressive action." Yamamoto's expression was serene, despite the dire circumstances. "However, there is another option, one that would demonstrate humanity's true capabilities and potentially resolve this crisis permanently." "What option?" Marcus stepped forward. "Admiral, I need to ask you to trust me. The training I've received here has shown me possibilities I never imagined. But implementing them will require your authorization to act outside normal military protocols." Rodriguez studied his face through the hologram. "Marcus, I've known you for 8 years. You've never asked for anything you couldn't deliver. What do you need?" "Permission to make contact with the coalition fleet directly, and authorization to negotiate on behalf of Earth government." "Negotiate what exactly?" Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either save humanity or doom it to eternal subservience. A demonstration that humans are not the primitive, aggressive species they believe us to be, that we have capabilities they haven't considered, and that attempting to dominate us would be inadvisable. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. Finally, Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Captain Chen, under emergency authorization Omega-7, you are hereby granted full diplomatic immunity and negotiation authority on behalf of Earth and all human colonies. God help us all." The transmission ended, leaving Marcus alone with the Yamato crew and the impossible task ahead of him. Through the ship's transparent hull, he could see the vast alien fleet spreading across the darkness like a constellation of hostile stars. "Kasumi," he said quietly, "how close can we get to their flagship without triggering defensive systems?" "Distance is irrelevant," she replied. Her form beginning to shift into the energy state he had learned indicated preparation for advanced techniques. "We are going aboard their command vessel directly." Before Marcus could ask how that was possible, the world dissolved around him once again. But this time the sensation was different. Instead of falling through liquid starlight, he felt like he was stepping through a doorway that existed between one moment and the next. He found himself standing in what appeared to be a vast cathedral made of living crystal. Beings from a dozen different species turned to stare at the humans who had somehow materialized in the center of their supposedly secure command center. The largest figure, a creature that looked like a cross between a dragon and a geometric equation, spoke in harmonics that made Marcus's bones ache. "Impossible. This chamber is shielded against all known transportation methods." Kasumi smiled, her tattoos now blazing with patterns that seemed to contain entire galaxies. "Known to whom?" A smaller figure, clearly recognizable as Altarian despite elaborate ceremonial robes, stepped forward. "You are the human who killed Squad Leader Carthan on Nexus 7. You will surrender yourself for judgment." "I killed no one," Marcus replied calmly, feeling the training techniques automatically adjusting his voice to carry harmonics that would resonate with the various alien physiologies present. "Squad Leader Carthan died because he chose violence against an unarmed non-combatant. His death was the consequence of that choice. Semantic distinctions, the dragon creature rumbled. Your species has proven itself unfit for peaceful coexistence. The coalition has decided that humanity's expansion must be contained. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a calm certainty that seemed to expand outward from his core, and we have decided that such containment is unacceptable. What happened next would be debated by xenobiologists and physicists for decades to come. Marcus didn't move, didn't gesture, didn't activate any visible technology. He simply disagreed with the reality the coalition had constructed around their assumed dominance. Every weapon in the chamber suddenly became inert. Not broken, not disabled, but fundamentally convinced that violence was no longer a viable option. The crystal walls began to resonate with harmonics that induced feelings of profound peace in every being present. Most dramatically, the artificial gravity that held the massive structure together shifted orientation, causing everyone except Marcus and Kasumi to experience the disorienting sensation of standing on what had been the ceiling. "This is impossible," the Altarian gasped, his translator struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in his language. "No," Marcus replied, his voice now carrying overtones that seemed to speak directly to the listener's consciousness, rather than their hearing organs. "This is what happens when an unstoppable force encounters an immovable object, and both choose to dance instead of fighting." The dragon creature's crystalline hide began to pulse with patterns Marcus somehow understood repris.